Hello and welcome to Get Rich Slow, the podcast that challenges the conventional get-rich-quick ideology and instead explores what authentic success really means and how you can achieve it. I'm Hannah Martin, I'm the founder of Talented Ladies Club, and today I'm excited to be joined by healing and emotional trauma expert Antonia Harman for an episode on emotional healing. And I know, and I've already told you this, Antonia, I am really excited to talk about this because although it's not initially kind of on the surface financial business related, I do think that our emotional and physical health is really important as part of general success. So can I ask you, first of all, talking about success, what that means to you?
Such an interesting question. I was pondering that this afternoon. I was thinking, what does success mean on different days? And, you know, some days success can be actually just getting out the house, and other days it can be dissolving a disease. I think it's so variable because sometimes it's totally different things. But I think for me, the thing which I feel most proud of is when my students do something seemingly life-changing for someone else. I think that's the thing which is really exciting to me. So there was a situation a few years ago where we had one of our students who had depression for 27 years. And he'd taken every pill and been to every psychologist, psychiatrist, done everything that you would do as a sensible human with such a debilitating illness. And he was on my level 2. And I just had this harebrained idea or inspiration, whichever one. And I said, right, you guys dissolve his depression. And they just went, what? Antonia, this is absolutely batty. What? And they said, how do we do it? And I said, just follow the techniques, you know what to do. And I just said, just intend to clear his depression, not having awoken their abilities to do different things. We can get into that in a bit, but, you know, they just follow their techniques. And after 10 minutes or within 10 minutes, I said, looks like it's gone. How do you feel when the emptiness is gone and I feel cheerful? And I said, when was the last time you felt cheerful? He said, about 5 months ago, but I had some beers. When was the last time you felt cheerful without the aid of alcohol? And he said, I don't know, but it's been years. That was April 2.5 years ago. And he's not had a whisper of depression since. So that is one of my biggest, I've done loads of things myself and I regularly do things like clear depression. But for me, having my students do something which is so world changing for somebody, it's like, that's sort of what makes you warm and gooey inside. And I suppose success, the definition is what makes you warm and gooey when you think back at it. So
absolutely. No, I love that. And it's really interesting when I ask everyone that question. And as I said before, no one ever says success is a Lamborghini or, you know, but how many people talk about the impact that they have on the world, which is what you're talking about there, and the good that they're able to do is essential to that. So I love that story. That's brilliant.
I wouldn't mind a Lamborghini.
So obviously I mentioned you're a healer and you've mentioned a story there. So what is your background? What it is that you actually do and how did you come to that?
Right. Well, I've sort of invented myself a job or, I mean, maybe it's an old one. I do refer to myself as a wizard or a sorcerer. Now, sorcerer is someone who uses source energy. So, but wizard is actually the one that I go by more than a healer, although I am also a healer. And basically what it means is I think we're all gods and goddesses who have no idea how amazing we truly are. And I spent the last 20 years awakening my latent abilities. So I've got some superpowers. And the difference between a witch and a wizard isn't gender, because you can have a male witch or a female witch. A warlock can be a female witch, or you can have male witches and female witches. But wizardry is something different. It's using pure intention. So witchcraft or 3D healing or lower level magic, depending which terminology you would like to use for it, is using an intermediary to help you do the work. So you might be using some sort of process. You might be using a spell, an angel, a card, a ceremony, a pill, something as an intermediary to help you do the work, which is all brilliant stuff. I'm doing something different and I'm just dissolving. I've awoken my abilities to be able to do healing, and I now do the healing without having to use a process, by having the abilities awoken up in me by sort of evolving myself to what humans more truly are. So I just do things by intention. So I set an intention to do something and then it happens. And it mostly started around trauma. So I instantly dissolve traumas. If you go to my website, divineempowerment.com, you can actually get a free video on there and you can dissolve a trauma just from watching a video. It holds in the data. And even pretty severe traumas, you can dissolve the resonance with the trauma. So how it is You know, when you're okay and then something triggers you, you're reminded of some awful situation that happened to you, and then suddenly you're overwhelmed with grief, rejection, betrayal, abandonment, whatever it might be. It's just these little pockets of energy. And I figured out, and most people can sense them, so you can know when someone's depressed or anxious, you can feel it in the air. I've just taken that a few steps further, and I could dissolve the resonance with it or the dissonance with it, so that so it's just empty. I just literally empty out that space. So when you think about it again, nothing happens. The emotion isn't there. Then I've been doing that for many, many years, and I've taken that a lot of steps further towards actually dissolving diseases, which I'm pretty proficient at these days.
Excellent. That all sounds really interesting. And I'm not really. No. It was interesting, but no.
What do you want to know?
Kind of. So basically, you it sounds like a journey that's been partly self-teaching or self-discovery.
Oh, 100% self-taught.
Yeah.
Yeah, I teach other people.
Which you
I do it almost. Yeah, no, I've just spent a lot of my time in a trance, and it sounds completely bizarre, but I have just spent a lot of the last 20 years in a trance state, awakening my abilities, and now I've got abilities, and I can do quite cool healing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, let's find out more about this. So, to start with, what is trauma, and how does it? I mean, obviously, we all know on a level what trauma is, but actually, what is trauma? How does it happen, and how does it impact us?
So, I mean, we're talking about emotional trauma as opposed to like physical trauma. I suppose physical trauma would be like an injury. So we'll just stick to emotional. It's just something that holds a resonance or a dissonance within your system. So when you think about it, it still upsets you. Anything which is upsetting days, weeks, months later, and it's still, the things that you lay awake at night and start thinking about, and the things that you can't let go of, which actually cause you to not be your true loving self. I think humans are actually amazing, and I think our nature is to be kind and to be loving. And when you act like a bit of a dick in whatever capacity, there's a reason behind it, and there's a trauma behind it. There's a trauma response every time you're angry, every time you're upset, every time you are less than your best. It's because some trauma happened to you long ago. So it can affect your behavior. It can affect how quickly you anger. It can affect, whether you become just very upset very quickly about various different situations. But it can do a lot of other things that people don't necessarily consider. So one of them is about the law of attraction. So the law of attraction, I would assume most people are familiar with. What you're thinking about, you attract. The secret is based upon this. But no one really talks about the dark side of the law of attraction. Now, the dark side of the law of attraction is whatever's in your energy field. So, if you have lack in your energy field, you're attracting lack. If you have betrayal in your energy field, you're attracting betrayal. So it's like it mirrors. So it's actually you ordering whatever it is from the universe, but you can be ordering things you don't want just as easily as you can be ordering things you do want. So unless you get that trauma and become at peace with it in some way, and there are many different ways of doing it, I find mine to be, I call it fast track forgiveness. But unless you can really get to a point where you are neutral about some horrible thing that happened to you, unfortunately, you're ordering that from the universe and will continue to do so. So you will get low grade or high grade, the same experience of betrayal, of rejection, whatever it is that happened to you before. So you've got one side of it, which is awful, the dark side of the law of attraction. So you have to be very aware of your thoughts and have some emotional self-discipline and not allow yourself to spiral. Notice when you are starting to go off in some tangent and nip it in the bud. And if you can do that, then you won't, history won't keep repeating itself. So there's one side of it in that when in the physical world, you're attracting things you don't want. The other side of it is it causes diseases. Every trauma, diseases coming through, I'll tell you what diseases are then. So trauma attracts diseases and creates diseases even worse. So I've come up with something which I call Antonia's grand theory of disease. I've actually worked out what disease is. And it's sort of an adaptation and an extended version of what Louise Hayes was saying back in, I think it was the 60s or 70s when she was coming out with You Can Heal Your Life. Maybe it was the 80s, whenever it was. So basically, what happens is diseases come in three categories: a gas, a liquid, or a solid. Gas-based diseases are thought-based diseases. When you hang around someone who's got anxious or depressed, You spend 2 seconds with them, and you can feel it in the air around them. It makes you feel anxious or depressed. It can actually take a few days to sort of get rid of that funk, or you just get nervous around an anxious person. Or you walk into a room after an argument and you're like, ooh, what's happened in here? You can just cut the atmosphere with a knife. It's palpable. So gas-based diseases, they're thought-based diseases. So emotion is like a gas. Gas-based diseases are thought-based diseases. So you've got that. So it's, it just hangs around someone. Anxiety or depression hangs around somebody. And when they leave the room, it's there's almost a residue of it. They sometimes smell of it in the air around them. So gas-based diseases are emotional-based diseases or thought-based diseases. Then you've got liquid-based diseases. Now, liquid-based diseases are something like a chronic pain. Now, think about backache. Backache sometimes is a 10 out of 10, sometimes it's a 2 out of 10. It's not always the same severity. And its location actually shifts. It can be an inch to the left or an inch to the right. It's not in exactly the same position, the same as something like fibromyalgia. So it behaves like a fluid. It sort of sloshes about, goes in, goes out. It moves like a liquid. Or you've got a cyst. A cyst is the literal ball of fluid, so we know that's a liquid. So there are a number of diseases which are liquid-based diseases. And if you remember from your high school chemistry, physics, you will remember that the difference, how does a gas go into a liquid? You just pump enough gas in and the molecules slow down and cool down. They condense and they get denser and denser and denser and denser, and that becomes a liquid. That's what causes liquid-based diseases. Your thoughts being that gas, compressed, compressed. And where it goes in the body is the quality of the disease and what the disease actually is. So, backache is about not feeling supported. Your whole back is about your support network, and lower backache specifically is about lack of structure to your finances and worried about money. And so with the cost of living crisis that people are having at the moment, people will notice they've probably got a bit more of a sore lower back than they would do otherwise. And you can always say, it's because it's getting colder, but it's actually because people are fretting about this sort of stuff. So, I mean, I'm having a lot of work done in my house, and I had a little bit of a, I was saying to myself, and I was using bad phrasing, and I did get pulled up on it by my friend, but we're all guilty of this, even me, saying I was hemorrhaging money. And I got a bit worried about that. And then suddenly I got lower backache, and I was like, Antonia, what are you doing? And then I was like, it's because I've changed beds. And, it's always easy to make an excuse. And I would dissolve the resonance in my system about lack of financial support. And then suddenly my backache was gone within seconds. It was quite interesting doing that one. Okay, so there's a liquid-based diseases, compression. Then you've got solid-based disease, which is like a tumour. A tumour is hard as a rock. You press a tumour and it's hard as a rock. And that is the compressed thoughts. So to dissolve diseases, all you have to do is know what the thoughts are that cause the diseases. If you completely dissolve that and get that out of someone's system, diseases, fall away from people, and sometimes instantly. At least with the liquid ones. Solid ones are very tricky because there's just so much compression in there. But gas ones are pretty easy for me at this level. And liquid ones are pretty easy as well. The solid ones are really difficult. But I do consistently help people with all sorts of different issues, which is quite fun. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And like some of, I have heard of things like the etheric body and this idea that's kind of unresolved emotions that we have, and I guess emotional trauma ultimately can manifest it in sort of these solid kind of blockages, which I guess is really similar to what you're saying. What you've done is break down the process of how it gets to that point.
Yeah.
And I guess all the intervention opportunities as well that we have along the way, where, when it remains as a thought, as the gas kind of element, if we could intervene there and at the various points where we have opportunities to maybe stop before it gets to an extreme level.
Well, I think there's a good reason why forgiveness is fundamental in every religion. It's one of the underpinning principles in every single religion, because if you actually do forgive these situations yourself or perpetrators within, then you don't get to the disease stage. Everyone, all the religions have it, and I think that's to keep us actually healthy. But if we end up lamenting on it and get fixated on something rubbish, then actually that can cause us to be sick. It does cause disease, and it can, and I love the simplicity of the theory, because, as Einstein says, if you can't explain something simply, you don't know it well enough. But this, it fits across the board, it consistently works, and I'm having incredible results. And I've got a textbook that I read to people called Metaphysical Anatomy. It tells me the emotional reason behind diseases. And when I read that, you feel victimized by the words. You literally, it's really uncomfortable. And then if you actually work through it, then these diseases fall out. I mean, I had another example a while ago. I had an ovarian cyst and I didn't know what it was. And I was in a relationship I shouldn't have been in with a man who was very angry, and we'd have tantrums regularly. And I got quite resentful of him. And that's the emotional reason behind cysts, is resentment towards a partner. So that was interesting. So I didn't know what it was for a long time. And then I had a scan, and they measured it. It was about the size of a golf ball. I've actually got pictures of it before and after. And then I worked on it, and I went back and I read my book, and I dissolved the resonance with it. And this sort of cloud of resentment and being grumpiness and angry all sort of radiated off me for about 3 days. Then I felt a little pop, like a very, not like a rupture, but a soft pop. And then suddenly it was completely gone. And I pressed my abdomen where the pain was, and it wasn't there anymore. It was gone after 3 days. And that was several years ago. So, and I've been developing this ever since, and it gets consistent results. It's really fun and really easy.
And I think it's a really important thing you talk there about forgiveness. And I think, and I don't know how you feel about this, it's something that I've learned, it was self-compassion, because I think when you come out of, so me, very brief, for example, left a very abusive marriage, was very depressed afterwards. But ultimately what I had to do was forgive myself for allowing that to happen. When I practiced compassion with myself, which took me 2 years to get to, but when I finally did, it was like an utter release. I have no negative feelings. Obviously I have the memory of that, but I have no resentment towards anyone in that, because I've let it go. And I was only able to let it go when I forgave myself. Yep. And I think we don't do that often enough. And I see a lot of people berating themselves. And I think, do you think that self-compassion is important? We should do, and it's not about forgiving other people. It's about having compassion for ourselves, which releases other people from our lives. Does that sound something? Yes.
And also yes, absolutely, you're 100% right. But also the forgiveness is not necessarily for them. I mean, it's important to have boundaries, and it's just important to let it go so it doesn't eat away at you. Regardless of them, they might be someone that you never want to see again. Maybe they're just a horrible person. Let them do that. That's no problem. But if you keep lamenting on it, it will ultimately make you sick. So, you need to let it go. And as Elsa says, let it go. It's really important to be able to let everything go. And if you don't have any compassion for yourself, because we're all silly at times. We all make mistakes. We all get caught up in things and lost in things. And it is embarrassing sometimes. You're like, how the hell did I get myself into that situation? I should be better. And I should do better. But it's what teaches us, and then we did learn, and sometimes we have to get a big wallop in the face before we actually realize what the lessons are, and then to change things around, because you get comfortable. Comfortability is it stops you having growth, and sometimes it has to get so ruddy bad that you end up making a move and changing things and coming out of these horrible relationships. And then you learn, and then you grow. And, maybe one of the reasons that you got your successful company as well is because you got away from him, and then you felt very empowered to be able to work on these things. So, some of these steps are journeys on our way to make us who we are today. So, they sucked at the time, but now, you can be the best version of yourself because of it. But yes, self-compassion, everyone out there, make sure you've got self-compassion, because it's so easy. Your body's listening. And everything that you're doing, if you spend your time looking in front of the mirror and saying you're fat, you're ugly, you're whatever it is, your body's listening all the time. So just in every way, from the mistakes that you've made, for everything that you've done or everything that you are, you have to just be kind to yourself. Otherwise, you're just literally, it's almost like you're cannibalizing yourself when you're mean to yourself. There you go. I quite like that phrase.
Definitely. So can I ask you why we struggle to heal from trauma? So, why do we hold on to it? Why don't we let it go? I mean, so you talked there about how we can, but why don't we?
Um, I think people are too busy intrinsically. I don't think people take quiet time and reflective time every day or every week to actually sit down and go, what happened? Why did I behave like that? Why did I let that happen? What did I do? How am I culpable? Do I need to set better boundaries? Do I want these people out of my life? Just to really assess their life. I think everyone's just running around all the time and they just don't stop. And then they get stuck in some sort of trauma loop, because unless you've changed your behavior, set stronger boundaries, changed your relationships in some way, unfortunately, they don't know that they're doing something wrong. And then it keeps getting worse. The same thing will keep repeating itself because one, you're attracting it, and two, you're not changing it. So until you start doing that and really analysing and go, why was I mean? Why were they mean? Unless you really have quiet time to really reflect and alter course, it's going to be repeating itself. No one takes the time to do it. And it's a real discipline to be able to do that. And it's real time, but most people are rushing to work, socials, family, whatever they're doing, and they don't take any time, even an hour a week, to really work through. I mean, one of the beautiful things, a lot of people write diaries, or, there are all these planners and things that people are doing these days, which is really, really useful, because it's actually taking time to reflect and to notice when things weren't working very well for you. So if you can have a practice like that, then that makes it much easier to forgive, because you can actually look at things. But if you're just compounding trauma and compounding life, you never really take the time. So unless you take time to forgive and to seek forgiveness, as I said, religion all has forgiveness in it, but it's an active thing. I don't know, say Catholicism for one, you would go to, I've done such and such. When you go to confession, you go and say things, and you have to go and atone for your sins and deal with it. Whether or not we like Catholicism, they've actually got a really good principle of forgiveness. Judaism have the Yom Kippur, where they have to go and admit everything that they've done on a particular one day a year, and then they ask for forgiveness, and the other person has to forgive them. They have a ritual of forgiveness, and it's something which is universal. If we're not actually taking time to forgive and to notice, how are we ever going to get better?
That's a really good point. And I guess also today, I remember, obviously I grew up, and I'm sure you did, pre-digital age. We didn't have phones. We had TV, but we didn't watch much of it. It was one. Yes, exactly. That's the point. We had so much more time to think, and nowadays we don't have to think. We can fill any second with our mobile phone. So yeah, I can definitely see that.
Not getting bored's a big problem. I really do. We used to get bored, and now there is no opportunity, because we've got thousands and thousands of TV channels. We had 4. When we were growing up, there were 4, and a lot, and then they would finish at midnight. And I suppose we were too young to be up too much later, but you'd actually have to get bored. And when you got bored, you'd think about things and process things. If we're not actually spending any time without complete stimulation, you're never going to really have time to think.
Exactly. I always like to make notes in these, like when I do write-ups after this. Boredom is important, I'm going to write. Definitely. And so let's just say, so someone's listening to this and going, I totally, this is me, I'm really busy. And they are going to take the time and go and put some time aside to really think. Obviously, they can think about, okay, how have I felt in the last week, and how might I process that? How might I forgive myself? Okay, I was tired and grumpy then, and I tooted someone in the car and I felt bad about it, whatever. But how can someone tell if they have emotional trauma that is hurting them? Maybe going a bit deeper, stuff that has maybe gone from a gas to a liquid, perhaps. But how can they identify emotional trauma they maybe need to look at?
You'll know what your triggers are. Everyone knows what their triggers are. When is it that they aren't kind? When is it that what gets you, what makes you feel really bad? Do you feel abandoned by people? Do you feel resentful of things? Do you feel betrayed by things? And there'll be themes, I call them emotional themes, which will keep repeating in your life. And then just borrow down and spend some time thinking about it and forgive it. Whatever it is. And you'll notice that just notice, you can note down, I sometimes tell this to my clients. Note down every time you get grumpy, mean, or say something which isn't particularly kind to people. Note it down and notice. If you may already have some awareness in it, but if you don't, then start from the beginning and note down every time you say or do something which you're not proud of, that you're not happy about, that you could have done better in. And then notice what your trigger was. Was it that you felt unappreciated? Was it that you felt betrayed? Was it that you felt sad? Was it that you felt whatever? And then notice what the theme is and then trace it back. Why do you always get like that? When did that come from? And you'll notice, you'll notice that there's probably several linchpins along the way of maybe someone was mean to you at some point at school or whatever it might be. And that's made you always be on guard. And that's made you not feel safe within yourself. And then, this is, we talked about hypnosis a minute ago. You can do this with timeline therapy as well. It's a similar process to that. And you can just really go back and look at things with from a bird's eye perspective and look at them and go, because James kicked me when I was 7, has that meant that whatever, and has that meant that you've never trusted men ever since, or whatever it might be, or was it some comment or someone sleazy that's made you feel apprehensive towards different people in different situations? I think if you can start really logically tracing it back, then you can start to release these things which are really holding you captive and holding your happiness and your love capacity captive. Because I think that's what happens. Look, children are infinitely kind and loving and bright and playful. And what happens is, as we grow up, there's more and more trauma that happens to us, and we become more and more serious. You can see this with children who've got parents who perhaps are very unwell or addicts or in a wheelchair or something like that, and they've had to take on a parental role very soon. They've become very, very serious. Trauma makes you serious. The less trauma that you have, the more playful you will be. This doesn't mean you're completely hedonistic and irresponsible, but you can be very responsible and yet, just really fun at the same time, and still get everything done. It's trauma that makes you serious and pious and judgy and upset in the world. So if you can get rid of that, then you can really start to improve your happiness levels, your kindness levels, and you start to attract a better life. Because it's not coming from the trauma. If you are in a lovey-dovey sort of headspace all the time, almost like you're falling in love, this resonance of love or happiness, you attract much better stuff. If you're in grief or sadness, your universe will show you. If you think that, I don't know, if you're a thief, it's if you're a liar, you always expect everybody to lie because you're attracting those situations. Where if somebody you don't lie, it doesn't cross your blooming mind. You are attracting those situations and those people, and the more you raise your vibration and become happier and more complete and more loving towards other people, the better your reality becomes, and the easier it is to be that way. So it is all a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you are really making your bed and sleeping in it. So the more good you put out into the world, the more good finds you. But you have to make sure you're not doing it for an appreciation level or for something else, because there's a lot of people who become martyrs, especially often parents are martyrs, and then they feel unappreciated because they've gone and done more than they were able to do, and it was outside of their comfort level or their exhaustion. They're too tired to do that, and then they feel very, very depleted. So you've got to take care of yourself. Put your, like they say on the aeroplane, put your oxygen mask on first, because if you're completely depleted, there's nothing to give, and then you get grumpy at other people when they've not necessarily done anything wrong. So I just think everybody needs to take more quiet time, turn the phone off, and have a meditation time or a quiet time or a contemplative time. Doesn't matter which one it is, but just have time for yourself, at least once a week. If you can't even do, 10 minutes a day or something of just quiet, no phones and no connection with anything else, and just think and be quiet and be still and just think about the good things you've got in life. Gratitude is really helpful. A lot of people are, gratitude's very top of the pops at the moment, but if you have an attitude of gratitude and really think about the things that you are grateful for, then you actually raise your vibration. Then you have more things to be grateful for, because you're attracting that sort of thing with the law of attraction again. You attract what you put out. So if you're actually doing and thinking about beautiful, loving things, then more beautiful, loving things come towards you.
But I'd imagine it has to be, because like I say, gratitude is very popular right now. And by the way, I love your practical advice there about kind of tracking things. But you have to, that gratitude has to be authentic, doesn't it? Because
yes.
I do see a lot of people sort of almost like kind of adopting these things because they know it works and telling themselves, I'm being grateful. But
it doesn't work.
And it's not their fault.
In your heart, it doesn't work. And the thing is as well, like if you're feeling a bit like the world's not great for you at the moment, for example, then you can start with more fundamental things. And just remember, I mean, hopefully you've got a roof over your head and food in your belly. And that alone is something that you should really be grateful for, because there's a lot of people in the world that don't. So if you can start by thinking, you know, even if your world is, you know, upside down and there are problems, you know, having a bed, having food, having, you know, a phone to be able to watch this on, or a computer, you know, that sort of stuff means you are better off than a significant number of people in the world. So if you can't find anything big, you know, anything like, or especially if you're doing this sort of comparing yourself to other people and how much better everyone else is off, they've got a big car, they've got this, they've got that, they're more successful, whatever it is, just start at the basics. You've got a roof over your head and food in your belly, and that you can be grateful for, because actually some people don't. But if you know, if anything you're doing disingenuously energy wise is not going to work. You know, it's just not.
And I would imagine as well, like it's everything you've said here, but even sort of things you've been doing, like this isn't a once and done thing. It's not like, I'm cured, the rest of my life's going to be perfect. It sounds like it's a habit we all need to practice regularly, like brushing our teeth.
I don't know, then you book in a session with me and I can do quite a lot in one go. I mean, there's that side.
But I mean, but in terms of like, obviously, if we've got stuff we've held on to and that has, you know, become significant, but in terms of living a life where we are able to deal with stuff happens to all of us in life, you know, that we're not going to necessarily want. But being able to clear that and to move through life in a more emotionally healthy way sounds like it's something we need to practice all the time.
If you want to do it the way that I've just said, then that is a regular practice. If you want to, you know, do it the super speed way, as I said, I teach classes on this, and I teach you how to dissolve trauma. You know, in level 1, you learn how to dissolve trauma. And actually, because I've got to the level that I'm at now, things don't stick to me. Like, bad things don't stick to me, which is, you know, really useful. And then I can also audit lives and get rid of all of your grief, resentment, rejection, betrayal. I can do that. That's a level 3 thing. You can do the whole of that in one go. But if you keep an eye on it and notice when you get upset about things, and you can delete that whole story, it makes it much easier. Or you can do it, you know, the non-magical way, and you can do it by I'm a wizard, I do it the magical way.
So can I ask you then, so this might not be something you're able to answer in a simplistic way. So we've talked about how you can identify whether there might be something that you know, and I love that practical step about, you know, noticing patterns and then going back to triggers. Oh, that's brilliant. Like I say, this might not be something that you can, because this is what you teach. But if someone's listening and going, right, okay, I've identified there's something and I can't let go of it. You know, I have looked at the cause. Is there anything that they could do to help themselves? Any practical tips, or do they really need help?
I mean, the first and most effective way would be to book in with me or one of my practitioners. If you want to do it by yourself, here's a way to do it. Okay, so this is a possibility. What you need to do is layer something good on top of it. So you think about, so maybe get yourself into a really lovey-dovey state. You could do this by cooing over a baby or a pet or something, but get yourself into that really, really lovey-dovey state. And then think about that rubbish thing. And they will sort of cancel each other out. So what you want to do, you know, your vibration is really high and that vibration is really low, and they will start to meet in the middle. And if you can keep doing that, you may be able to neutralize your trauma. that's one way of doing it. That would potentially work. But as I said, book in. We'll do it much more easily and it'll be gone in seconds. But yeah, you can certainly do it by that way, but you need to be able to find a really nice lovey-dovey state to be able to do it. But you can neutralize it in that way, and that's one way around it. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we've talked now about how trauma happens, how the negative side of how it can affect you. We've talked a little about identifying it. What are and I am sure there are many wonderful things. What are the benefits when we get out the other side? Why should we go through this process? Apart from the fact we don't want to get ill, why should we go to the effort of forgiving ourselves and practicing self-compassion and for others and moving past trauma? What do we get when we've done that work?
Happiness. I mean, what do you want more than happiness? Health and happiness. Oh, I mean, there's nothing more important than health and happiness. Is there? That's when you're rich or when you're wealthy, when you've actually got health and happiness. Lamborghinis are fantastic. But if you're not healthy and you're not happy, so what? Honestly, so what? And some of the richest people in the world are actually the most miserable. Some of them aren't, but some of them are actually really blooming miserable. And it's not worth it. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got, they say that there was a study they did in America a while ago, and they said about money relating to happiness, because, there's this whole thing, money makes you happy, money doesn't make you happy, or around that. And they said if a household earns $70,000 a year, then that you can basically afford to make sure your kids are okay, that you can go on your holidays, and if there's a leak in the roof, then you can cover it. So it's a good level of a comfortable amount of money, and your happiness incrementally increases every 5,000-10,000 that you get up until that tipping point of 70,000. And then when you get to 80, 100, 300, a million, or whatever it might be, your happiness doesn't incrementally increase, it stays the same. Once you've got your basic needs met, it doesn't make that much difference after that. It doesn't. Your happiness doesn't increase. But being happy, attracting a really lovely life, not getting stressed about things, being at peace, being joyful, not fretting about things, and having good health, there's honestly nothing more value than your health and your happiness. And this is the route to that, I'm happy and healthy, and my life works out really, really well. I'm not aging in a proper way. I mean, I'm 42 and I don't look it, I've got, I'm not aging in a typical way at all. I haven't got any, let's see, Botox. Gonna check these days. I just have a joyful, lovely life. It's much better rather than being stressed and, just chasing my tail the whole time. And the world is kind to me. The happier you are, the more at peace you are, the kinder the world is to you, and you stop attracting all these horrible situations. Why is it that you always get betrayed? Why is it that something always happens to you? It's because you haven't dealt with this stuff. So your vibration becomes a lot higher. You'll live a lot longer. Your life will be easier.
But actually, on that note, there was a study. I don't know if you've heard about this. I find this really fascinating. There was a study done in Israel because they discovered in Israel that men who'd lived through the Holocaust lived on average, I think it was 7 years longer than men the same age, the same sort of ethnic background, living in the same place lived, and they couldn't work out why that was. And ultimately, I'm simplifying it, but it was ultimately the men that had gone through trauma but had processed it and done all the stuff we're talking about here, so hadn't held on to stuff, were able to process it, had better physical health and a longer life than people who hadn't been through trauma or had been through trauma and not processed it. So I think also there is proof that actually being able to work through things and finding happiness afterwards can actually help you as well physically.
Yes, definitely. It's not necessarily what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And there's also the Harvard study of happiness, which is a fascinating study, which is the longest study which is ever run. And what they did was they got some Harvard, what do they call them, sophomores, and they got some local boys who, some of them didn't have running water. They were some of them were sort of street kids. And then they had, these sophomores, and I think they started 80 something years ago. It's the longest running study there's ever been. And actually they've managed to do 3 generations or 4 generations of people through keeping the same people. And some of them, were poor and became millionaires, billionaires, and some of them have gone the other way. One of them became a president. And it's really interesting because it's the longest study. So we've got all these predictions, like how is your health going to be in your 80s? And we'll look at, someone in their 50s and we'll go, okay, well, maybe it's to do with heart health and making sure that you are, I don't know, running or taking various different medications or eating a specific diet or whatever it is. And this is really fascinating because you can look at octogenarians, people in their 80s, and then you can predict backwards because you've actually got the studies, because what they've done is they kept on interviewing them every year or two, speaking to their doctors, asking them, asking their wife, asking their kids. They've actually done this huge study on all these different people. And so it's the longest study of longevity, but now they can look backwards rather than looking forwards. And what's the key to long life? It's happiness, and it's community, and it's having a sense of purpose. It's not all the things that we would think it was, like your specific diet and exercise and things like that. It's literally having a sense of purpose and happiness and community. And if you were in a marriage, which was, you might bicker, but you still know you can depend upon one another, then you were in good health. If you were in a marriage where you didn't feel safe or you didn't love them, or there was animosity between you, that would ultimately end your life sooner. It's about your emotions and have, this sense of purpose, sense of community, giving back. One of the things that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, which is really important, is being kind to others. We've got, unfortunately, people are becoming more and more isolated, and especially since we're all like this on our phones all the time. Social media isn't very social. It's actually quite isolating. When you get out there and do things to help other people, you actually feel good about yourself. And you're actually benefiting to other people, and that's really good for your mental health. Helping out at a soup kitchen and actually giving back is really good for your mental health. Just being all about you and being this separate island away from everybody else is ultimately horribly damaging, especially if you don't think that you think you're the most important person in the room, or think you're the only person that matters. If you start doing that and getting away from community and away from, your heart and maybe connection to source, that's really, really damaging, and ultimately, you won't live as long. So it's really about connection. It's about having people to support, and you supporting them and them supporting you. That's the key to long life. And letting go of these things that no longer serve you. There's just no need to continue. And most people listening probably had something that happened to them 30 years ago, which still gets to them. And they also say there's Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I think is a fantastic guy. He's written really great books. He's fantastic. And I was listening to one of his lectures the other day, and he said 50% of our memories are utterly made up. They're totally made up. And we might have had something that happened to us years ago, which we've hammed up and made to be this real monstrous situation. And actually it was a bad situation, but not nearly as bad as we've actually remembered it, because we play Chinese whispers in our own minds about something that happened and make it infinitely worse than it actually was. So, we really need to let go of things that happened 30 years ago, because all they're doing is harming us. There's no need to be worried about that. Do you even know that person anymore? Are they even the same person? Are you even the same person? And why let your past haunt you indefinitely and just literally just eat your happiness and your health?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Antonia. That was really interesting. I learned a lot, and as I knew I would. Thank you. If anyone's listening and they want to know where to find out more about you, or how they can maybe even book a session, where do they go?
My website is divineempowerment.com. So there you can book a session with me or one of my practitioners, all of whom are fabulous. You can also book classes. You can learn how to dissolve traumas yourself, and it's an awakening path. So you become more and more awakened, or it's an enlightening path. Enlightenment is a whole different thing, but enlightening. So you can do that and ultimately become healthier, happier, live longer, and have a better time. I'm also on my YouTube of the same name, Divine Empowerment or Antonia Harman. I've got my Instagram as well. Those are the things I'm mostly on, but there's loads of videos on my YouTube, and you can literally, before you invest, watch one of the videos on my YouTube, and there are interviews, and I'm dissolving traumas on there, and you can, the healing is embedded in the video. It works. So you can literally watch the video and you can have a trauma dissolved just by watching the video on YouTube, or there's one on my website when you sign up to the mailing list. So either way, so go and try it. You know, it may sound too good to be true, and that's fine. But all you need to do is watch the video, get your situation, grade it out of 10. I'll do some hocus pocus on the screen, and then your trauma will dissipate and will go down and go down and go down until then you feel at peace with whatever may have happened to you. So just try it and see if it makes you feel better. And if so, let me know in the comments on my YouTube, or sign up the mailing list. Lots of fun things coming up as well. So yeah.
And what was your URL again, just in case anyone missed it?
Everything. I mean, it's on the bottom of the screen, Divine Empowerment. If you put Antonia Wizard in Google, you'll find me easily enough. Okay. So Divine Empowerment though, but everything is on Divine Empowerment on my website, divineempowerment.com, my YouTube, my Instagram, Antonia Harman and Divine Empowerment. I'm easy to.
Thank you so much for your time today, Antonia.
You're welcome. Thank you, Hannah, for having me. Appreciate you.